Buying an aircraft. This video is about buying an aircraft. It's really about the legal perspective of buying an aircraft. There are many considerations about aircraft purchases which a mechanic could tell you more about, or a businessman could tell you more about. We will touch on all issues briefly, but you should not expect a lot of detail about inspections and affordability and options for sharing the plane, just for example. In this video, we will discuss finding aircraft to choose from, choosing the aircraft that is right for your needs, testing and inspecting aircraft, borrowing money, sharing the aircraft with co-owners, researching the title, the contract to buy the aircraft, insurance, closing, and registering the aircraft. The Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association has a whole lot of articles on buying aircraft. As far as I can tell, the AOPA covers most or all of these topics at some point or another. The articles can be found at www.aopa.org and specifically www.aopa.org/go-fly/aircraft-and-ownership. There are a lot of internet sites offering to sell aircraft. Like anything else on the internet, a buyer should be careful, and it is especially advisable to test fly and inspect an aircraft before buying it because 1, it's your life on the line if it fails, and 2, most aircraft are expensive, even very expensive. Some aircraft are as expensive as a house. The AOPA has a link to aircraft ads. Go to the AOP.org website Aircraft and Ownership part and click on AOPA Classified Ads. When choosing an aircraft, keep in mind that there is more expense to it than just the initial price. There is maintenance, insurance, hangar fees, and more. If possible, it might be best to buy a smaller plane or aircraft. The AOPA has a link to an operating costs calculator on its page, also at the Aircraft and Ownership part of their website. Having the aircraft inspected before purchase is very important. There are videos on YouTube, a lot of videos about this on YouTube that can give a lot more guidance than I can, but I will say 2 things. 1, get a professional opinion, such as a mechanic's opinion. And 2, there is no reason a seller should object to inspecting or test flying the plane more than once, although a busy seller or a busy plane might not have time to let you inspect or fly it a lot. It's kind of like buying a house. I mean, if you compare the cost of some planes, and people who sell homes will let you come see the home more than once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, in addition to all the people who are going to come inspect the home. So if it's an expensive plane, feel like you've got the right to ask to see it more than once. The AOPA also has a guide for the prices of aircraft called VREF. Once again, you can find the link at www.aop.org, Go Fly Aircraft and Ownership. VREF will not give you a detailed appraisal for a particular aircraft because, obviously, VREF has not seen every aircraft in the world and probably has not seen the aircraft that you would be interested in buying. But the website, vref.com, appears to have access to appraisers and inspectors. VREF is supposed to be for members of the AOPA only. But you could probably, if you have connections with the FAA or a local flying association or just a friend, you could probably get onto the name of a good inspector or mechanic who would be willing to look at your plane. And by the way, mechanics and inspectors can get nervous about inspecting planes. They're afraid that if something goes wrong, they might get blamed. But of course, that's why they get paid the big bucks. Most aircraft are so expensive they can only be purchased with a loan. Of course, the bank or company making the loan will have rules. For example, the loan company will insist on property insurance to cover any damage to the plane. Banks too. However you do it, they're going to want insurance to cover damage to the plane, if any. They will insist on a down payment. They will insist on a clear title. And they might have rules about its use. The bank or loan company will have a lien on the aircraft, which means they own part of it, and they will insist on being able to repossess the aircraft if the money is not repaid. The bank or loan company will run a credit report on the buyer or buyers. If you and some friends all want your name on the title, the loan company or bank will want all of you to submit to a credit report and will probably want all of you to sign the loan, although there might be exceptions. There are a lot of different ways to share an aircraft with others. Conceivably, the aircraft could be owned by a partnership, corporation, or LLC, controlled by you and your friends. However you do it, there are important considerations when sharing an aircraft, and all of these can be addressed, whether it be a partnership, corporation, or LLC. For example, if the aircraft needs repairs, who decides what repairs to make and what shop to take it to? Maybe it's all of you. Maybe you take a vote and majority rules. But what happens if there's a disagreement among the co-owners about the repairs? I mean, if the plane is worth $50,000 and you want to make $45,000 of repairs, are you really going to let 7 out of 15 make that decision? Or 9 out of 15 make that decision? If you're going to be spending as much on the aircraft to repair it as it's worth, in that situation, maybe you need all the co-owners to agree. Who is supposed to make sure loan payments, insurance payments, and other payments are made on time? If it is one person, do they need to tell the others when something happens, such as when a payment goes up? Are there certain things the aircraft should never be used for? What account will be used to make payments? What happens if a co-owner spends some of their money on the aircraft? If a payment is overdue, what rights do the co-owners have? What if a co-owner wants to get out of the relationship? How much are they going to pay him to get out? Are they going to pay him what he put in to begin with? Or are they going to pay him what the plane is worth at the time he wants to get out? All these things need to be talked about ahead of time. What if a co-owner breaks the rules of the agreement? For example, y'all all agree it won't be flown into Mexico, but he takes it to Mexico. What's going to happen in that situation? You might want to discuss it ahead of time before it happens. How will time on the aircraft be split? What will be everybody's rights if somebody uses the aircraft for too long? What if somebody wants to join your group? Whichever way you choose, make sure you know how it works with your financing company, or bank or loan company, however you want to put it. The bank or loan company might want to run a credit check on all potential co-owners. There are some companies that advertise aircraft sharing or joint ownership. Be careful about that. Some of those companies call it ownership, but will plainly say that nobody really owns a particular aircraft. These companies may have like 25 aircraft, which they shuffle around between their customers, and they call the customers owners, but they're really just customers. Often those companies will assign a particular aircraft to you if you sign up with them, but they will plainly say that you do not have any rights to that particular aircraft, and they will keep it as an option for themselves to swap out your aircraft without asking you. If those companies do not put your name on the title, then they are probably playing word games. What is actually happening is that you are paying to rent aircraft. They guarantee you can have, quote, your aircraft, unquote, or something similar with a 99% success rate. But they stay in control, and you do not really own any aircraft with those kinds of companies. There are multiple ways to make sure you are getting a clear title to the aircraft you pay for. Clear title means a title that does not have a lingering bank lien, that does not have a lingering partial owner, and that does not have any confusion about the serial number or IN number. There have been cases in which the identification numbers in the logbook match the frame but do not match the engine. There have been cases in which the numbers match the fuselage but do not match the wings. Here's an example. And I'm just making this up. But let's say 3 people buy a plane together. One of them dies. When one of them dies, he leaves everything in his will to his 3 children. So now you've got a man who owns 1/3 of the aircraft because he originally bought it with his 2 buddies. You've got a second man who owns 1/3 of the aircraft because he's one of the original purchasers. And you've got 3 children from the dead owner, and they each own 1/9. And let's say one of them decides he wants to join the Taliban, and the last time anybody saw him, he was on his way to Pakistan. In that situation, you will probably never find that one child who owns 1/9 and went to Pakistan. And it may not be worth it to you to try and find him so you can buy that plane. In that situation, it's quite possible you may never be able to buy that plane with a clean title. And you may be okay with that, but if you borrow money to buy the plane, the bank will not be okay with it. The best thing you can do to make sure you are getting a clear title is ask a mechanic or other inspector to make sure all the identification numbers match the logbooks, and ask the FAA to run a title history on the numbers. An FAA title history should go back to the first time the aircraft was registered in the United States, and it should show you every time somebody used the aircraft to borrow money and every time somebody bought or sold the aircraft. The title records are available through the FAA offices in Oklahoma City. You can contact them on the internet, of course. Other things that help make sure you are getting clear title are these. Check the title history on the FAA website. There is a place on the website where you can go and enter the N number to find who shows to be the owner. You can also check the title history through a service provided on the AOPA website. It's kind of like Carfax, but for planes. And finally, my third suggestion is put a clause in the sales contract that the seller is guaranteeing the full and complete title is being transferred to the buyer, free and clear of all encumbrances, liens, and security interests, except, of course, whatever liens put on there by the bank that's loaning the money so you can buy the plane. Also, the clause with the seller should go on to say that the seller will defend your title against anybody who claims to own even part of the aircraft. Of course, if the seller is a crook, this clause will not help you, but it puts pressure on most sellers to be honest. And if it turns out somebody comes forward and claims they own the plane, even if they sue you because you've got their plane or you've got a plane they claim part of, you can then go and sue the seller because you've got the clause in the contract saying he's going to defend your ownership. But all of the companies, such as the AOPA or any other kind of similar Carfax kind of thing for planes that run title histories, will rely heavily on the FAA records. But be careful because the FAA records are not absolutely conclusive. It's like the Vibert case. It is possible for somebody to own part of an aircraft without the FAA having a record of it. The FAA registration is like a car title in Texas. It can be good evidence, and it's right most of the time, but it is evidence at the most. The AOPA has put a sample contract on its website, and I put it on Moodle. It is a good contract and covers all the basics. If the purchase is for an aircraft that is complex or big, you will probably want to add some clauses. For example, you could add a clause that the contract depends on getting financing. So if you are unable to borrow money, then you are not stuck having to buy the aircraft. If you have concerns about the title or the safety of the aircraft, you can include some warranties. But keep in mind this about warranties. They are no more than promises and are only as good as the person who makes them. The best way to enforce a warranty is to get money from the seller, and most people, even people who own aircraft, do not have a lot of money available at the end of a lawsuit. What I mean is if you think the seller breached the warranty and did not keep his promise, or was unable to keep his promise, it doesn't matter if it's his fault or not, he made the promise, and if he can't keep it, and you have to sue him for it, you may win, but if he doesn't have the money, you don't really get anything. This comes back to a concept we talked about earlier in this class called judgment proof. Most people don't have the money to pay a judgment against them if they lose a lawsuit. Make sure there is no misunderstanding, and I'm talking about the contract again. When you do a contract to buy a plane, make sure there is no misunderstanding about what equipment comes with the aircraft, such as radio headsets, flares, tools, etc. You should have insurance lined up before taking possession of the aircraft. Once again, the AOPA has resources on its website, but almost any insurance agent can point you in the right direction. As said before, if you borrow money to buy the aircraft, then the loan company or bank will insist you have property insurance, and they will probably also insist you have liability insurance. If you do not borrow the money, you might still consider property and liability insurance. Some people are tempted to not buy insurance, but keep in mind how devastating it can be to lose an aircraft and have nothing to show for it. When the day comes to take possession of the aircraft that you bought, that is called the closing date. Make sure you get all of the logbooks and all of the equipment you expected. If you are trading aircraft, make sure the aircraft you are giving up is eventually registered to the new owner so that if the aircraft crashes or is seized for a crime, everybody knows it's not yours. Make sure everybody signs the necessary bill of sale. The FAA requires a bill of sale in order to register aircraft. The bill of sale is not the contract to sell. The bill of sale is done at the end when ownership is finally transferred. The FAA has a sample on its website that everybody should use. The bill of sale will need to be signed by the seller and buyers, all of them, and then the bill of sale must be sent to the FAA with a proper application and fee. When the FAA registers the aircraft, the FAA will make a note of any liens that exist because you borrowed money to buy it. And when and if you finally pay off the loan on the plane, then the bank or loan company should release their lien, and the release needs to go to the FAA so the FAA can take the lien off the registration. If you have any questions, I'll certainly try to answer them.